Assistant Pastor,
Recording in progress.
Dr. Alan Tenczar.
Thank you for the honor. I did not know I was an assistant pastor. I thought I was the president. But I want to give my thanks to Paul and Joan, Maurice, and the community here. So excuse my emotions, but I want to give you my life story, why I came here, what I've learned over the course of these last 40 years. And there's a lot that I have to talk about, so if I start to get boring, you're welcome to leave. There's a lot that I have to talk about, but I want to begin with how I became involved with spiritualism and what I've learned in this 3D tangible universe. So much of this is on my life story. When I was a child, I would go to the library and I would check out books on ghosts and spiritualism, seances. I was deeply intrigued in Houdini, who would sort out the good from the bad as far as spiritualists. Because spiritualists is a very prominent part of our religion after the Civil War and into the early 30s, and gradually it's dwindled down. Other religions have taken over in many ways. Well, in college I learned to meditate, but my real beginning with spiritualism began with a letter my girlfriend sent to me when I was in podiatry school, and she was in medical school. She sent me a nice letter and wrote a nice letter, but in the letter was a little clipping from a newspaper about the Clinton spiritualist camp in Clinton, Iowa, that they were having readings. The weekend of that reading happened to be the same weekend that I was going to be maybe about 20 miles away with a bunch of fraternity brothers doing what we call the Outhouse Olympics. So we were having a whole lot of fun. We were going there to have a whole lot of fun, and this was not that far out of my way, so I went there for a reading. Two things stand out to me that day. One, I asked where I was going to practice my podiatry, and she said Milwaukee. All this time, and it turned out that 10 years later, I had a practice on Milwaukee Avenue. I thought it was going to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but no, Milwaukee Avenue. But nevertheless, it just that manifested, but that's in retrospect. But the real incident, the real part of the reading that just blew me away was that as she was talking to me, she just had this sense of fright over her. And she just looked at me and she said, be careful, something's going to happen. Oh, it's horrible. And she grabs her right hip and starts holding her right hip. And I left there with that and went with that information, never having had a reading before, and I go to the party. Well, you know how fraternity brothers, when we get together, we have a wild time. Well, the next morning in my hangover stupor, there was a couple that was going into a canoe, and they were going to paddle. It was about 8 a.m. in the morning on this beautiful lake, very quiet, nobody on the lake. And I insisted, and I don't know why I did this, but I insisted that they take life preservers, and I insisted that they take this huge truck tire inner tube that we were using to sit in and float. And so here you have this little dinky canoe going down out onto the lake and this big tire hanging out of the middle because I insisted on it. Well, about 20 minutes later, we get word that that canoe was hit by a boat. And right over the middle, the canoe goes the girl in the front of the boat goes one way, the guy in the back of the boat goes the other direction, and he lands on the prop of the motor, that speed, right here. Chopped up part of his spine. But in his shock, what came floating to him was this inner tube, and it saved his life. So I guess there's more to this life than just our human bodies, than our physical bodies. And that kind of set me on my road that there's something real to the power of mediumship and the gift of mediumship. And more than that, our universal nature, that we are all part of that, should we choose to be. And we can choose to live on the earth, or we can choose to live in the spirit plane. But we also have to place a blend between the two. Which one do you want to spend more time in? And that was part of my life's journey. So I came back to Chicago, finished my residency, and I never heard of this church for the rest of my time through my residency or thereafter. So that was an ensuing 6 or 7 years. But then I left Chicago at my practice on Milwaukee Avenue because I wasn't doing so well. Went to Phoenix, Arizona, where there I met up with Harmony Chapel. And in Harmony Chapel, I'm going through the spiritualist book, the Summit, and in the back of the Summit talks about this church here. So when I finished my time down in Phoenix, I came back up here. And I did a lot of growth down in Phoenix. When I was alone, away from family, you have a lot of time to read, a lot of time to reflect, and a lot of time to meditate. I came back here and found this church, found Paul, Joan, there was Reverend Shainfeld at the time. Gradually that transitioned to Reverend Maurice. Now, also at that time, I was in my mid-30s, and I had a revelation that came to me that crushed my perceptions of reality, particularly my perceptions around the Catholic Church. And I found that my upbringing, my religious upbringing, and in many parts, everything around me was shattered. I realized that the Catholic Church, in my opinion, is based on a foundation that doesn't exist. And I'm not criticizing the rituals, I'm not criticizing the belief system, I'm criticizing the hierarchy. They have created a facade that allowed me and worked to keep me inside of a captured box. And the reason I never was hesitant to leave the box entirely was because of fear. They told me things are going to happen if you do this, things are going to happen if you do that. Don't go into that church, you're going to hell. Again, fear. Their motivation to keep me contained is fear. And I'm going to get back to that. Now, what I realized, what had happened to me was that the curtains between the perceived appearance of the Roman Catholic Church and the underlying aspects of some of the parts of that church is a curtain that separates evil from the rest of the body. And these people work very hard to maintain an image of purity and love, and they hide behind a collar. They hide behind all the good priests that are out there. They work very, very hard to suppress information that would do them harm, even though that information is the truth. They'll spin it, they'll lie, they'll turn it around, and use it to hurt. And I will tell you, to this day, they haven't changed. They are still doing exactly the same thing. They're saying the words everybody wants to hear, but they're still hiding that evil that's within them. Today, I don't look at them with fear. As I was trained to look at getting outside the box, I look at that institution with concern, and I look at the people within that institution with concern, because concern is a positive form of fear. When people are afraid, they are frightened. And when they're afraid, they disconnect from higher source. But to say that you're concerned about something allows you to be connected to the source with anticipation that you will get the information you need to alleviate that fear. Fear is, in my opinion, keeps us connected to this earth plane. Keeps and works and is very effective at disconnecting us from our spirit, our higher self, our God, infinite intelligence, consciousness, our minds, whatever you want to keep it. It puts us into a situation where we become very manageable to people who know how to use fear and to manipulate us through fear. So this brings up the question, what is reality and what is truth? Well, I'll give you some definitions here. Reality, 1, the quality or state of being actual or true. 1, such as a person or entity or an event that is actual. 2, 3, the totality of all things possessing actuality, existence, or essence. Now, what is truth? Conformity to fact or actuality. Reality, actuality, the reality of a situation. What is true? The definition of truth is consistent with fact or reality, not false or erroneous, synonymous, or conforming to the characteristics or criteria of a group or type, typical. Now, what is actual? Existing in reality, not potential, possible, simulated, or false. It's real. It's based on fact. Or 3, conforming to the characteristics of a group or type, typical. So in each of these definitions, there's 2 parts. There's one part of the definition that relies on fact, observed observations, and then there's another one that is basically a consensus of opinion. Now, when I speak to you about my truth, I'm giving you very much my illusion, but I also try to base that with as much fact as possible. But with another person, when they're talking to you and you trust them to give you the truth, are they giving you something that's a manufactured consensus? Are they giving you an illusion of truth? Are they Because in the Gospel of Caeleti, which is one of the apocryphal Gospels that did not make it into the New Testament, Jesus repeatedly said to his disciples, beware of the people who deceive you. Don't worry about anything much else. God will take care of you, but you must do it yourself. And beware of the people who deceive you. And what I've come, and you can call me skeptical, you can call me cynical, you can call me whatever you want. I would rather be called, skeptical. Is that there are a lot of people who have vested interest in deceiving us. I have not found that in this church. I have found only higher order love, kindness, tolerance, and beauty in this church. I can't say that about elsewhere, and I've been elsewhere. I can't say that about once I step out of this church. But here, this is a hallowed ground of what I would consider actual factual truth. Whether you believe in the phenomena of spiritualism or not, it does not matter. But this is a loving, kind, caring place. So, we must be on the same plane. And I'll try to do my best to deal between the illusion of truth and the facts involved with truth, so that I don't want to confuse you. Important to realize is from where does the consensus of opinion originate, or the illusion of truth it's giving you. You need to know, where is this originating? Now, when I look around us, we've been, for lack of a better word, we've been marketed since we were born. We were born into a culture. And that culture sets up our norms, just like I was, where this is the box. Don't venture outside of the box. You're safe within the box with us. You go outside, you're lost, you're gone. You won't be able to come back once you leave. Again, fear setting those boundaries. Now, when I look at what's coming off on the news, the media that's coming at us, there is nothing that you see, whether it be on a billboard, a television ad, on the television, on Netflix, where someone hasn't paid to have some sort of influence with that flicker of pictures in front of your face. And that person is expecting probably a 10 times return on their investment. Now, the investment that we give to you here is that you can have love and peace and kindness when you leave this place. But when you're dealing in the material world, which you'll find on television and elsewhere, you're finding what's there is a manufactured reality. Now, notice what happens with what kind of images they're putting to you on the television or the media. They're often showing you very horrific pictures. They're showing people who they portray as victims. They portray things to frighten us. Now, I'm going to give you a scientific fact. Watching television at that flicker rate, it is impossible to not be in a state of hypnosis and have the same brain waves as a person in hypnosis after about 35 seconds. So in 35 seconds, you're in a state of hypnosis, and what you are watching, what you involve your mind into, what you allow them to take over your thoughts, you're radiating. So if you see a murder going on the TV, you're radiating that fear. You're radiating that low energy to the universe. You're also keeping your mind in a low state of vibration. Who's paying for that? Think about it. And what are they telling you? More importantly, what are they not telling you? How are they keeping you in fear? And how do you know it's fear? Well, if that thought coming to you, if that thing is based in fear, to me, that's of earthly nature. That's to frighten us, to keep us disconnected from God. The more time we spend in front of a TV watching a horror show, that's less time we have with God. Now you take your choice. You can be here part of the earth, or you can be part of the God, with God or your higher power, however you imagine that to be. I choose to stay with my higher power. Much safer. Much nicer too. But, and those thoughts that they're injecting, those thoughts of fear, we also have them in other areas too that come to us. Again, passively we allow those thoughts to come into us when we're watching television or a movie or anything like that. We also passively get them when we are listening to a lecture or hearing somebody give thoughts out. When somebody expresses their opinion, those opinions allow us to stimulate us to think. Generally speaking, you don't get the opportunity to think watching television. That's not designed for that so much. They don't call it programming for nothing. And be aware of that. It's your choice what you want to do with your life and where you keep your thoughts. I choose to keep mine on a higher level as much as I can. Now, how can I keep those? How can I keep those loving thoughts? Well, first way I learned is to be able to sit back and observe my thoughts. That came through meditation. To sitting back and observing what information is allowed to be played in the background, what information is on that television. I turned my television off in 2007 and I haven't missed it. I haven't missed the news either. It's all around us. You can't miss it. But I choose to sit back and observe the news. This is my way of going about things. I choose to sit back and try my best to observe my thoughts. I feel sorry, especially for myself, at a time when I would have resentments. I still do have some resentments. And let me warn you about resentments. The key phrase I heard a long time ago is resentment is like a barb with a nasty hook on it. Trying to get rid of it is very difficult. But the important thing is that there's nothing more caustic to its container than a resentment. So doing your best to get rid of those barbs, pulling it out, and learning to accept whatever it happens to be that leaves you that resentment will bring you on a path of lightness and good. Because that resentment harbors fear, and it's keeping you from your higher power. I've also learned that the antidote for fear is knowledge. And that and the only way to get knowledge is to actively go search for it yourself. It's not necessarily going to be given to you unless you ask for it. That's what happened to me. When I was going through my crisis about 30 years ago, and asking, I need proof. God, if you're there, show me the proof. Boom. 2 days later, a patient comes in, independently gives me confirmation of what I knew. 3 days after that, another patient comes in, happens to work with the first person that came in and gave me the exact same confirmation, but they did not know that they independently saw me. They did not plan on seeing me. Boom. But I had to ask. But more than asking for it, I had to be willing to take what is going to come. And taking what comes, one needs an open mind. One needs to be willing to sit there and take some blows, to sit there and cry, to sit there and realize, it isn't what I thought it was. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I can tell you, walking through that fear, and that illusion of fear that I had was hard, but so joyful on the other side, to step out of that box. whatever you choose to keep in your mind, you're going to manifest. So if you choose to harbor fearful thoughts, either through television or harboring worrying or through resentments, you're going to manifest that. It's not healthy in the long run. We all know that. If you want love in your life, displace those thoughts. Get rid of those thoughts. Try to work to get them out. And I've got 4 techniques to rid my mind of those thoughts. And the foundation is to learn to separate. The foundation for these techniques is to separate yourself from that thought. Think of that thought as an object. And another thing to consider, which was mentioned to me before I get to those, don't ever think your thoughts are your own. When you're sitting there contemplating and you get a thought, where did that thought come from? Who gave me that thought? But if you get these negative thoughts, one of the things to do is that you can ask that thought to immediately leave you. Say, I have dominion over my mind, I have dominion over my soul, I have dominion over what I'm doing, and I demand that that thought go away. Another method is to take that thought. Again, you have to objectify these thoughts. Take that thought, put it into a heavy box that has a very heavy lid that only you can open. Put it in the box, close the lid, and go on. Third way, and this is probably the most healthiest, and for lack of better terms, the most introspective, is to ask that thought where it came from. What is the purpose for me to have that thought? Is there a source to that thought that I need to reflect on? Is there something that I haven't resolved in my life? 2 things will happen. You'll get an answer to that, or that thought's going to go away. And the last way is to distract yourself. Go pick up something that you want to do. But sometimes when we're doing repetitive tasks that we like to do, when we're doing those repetitive tasks, we're actually meditating. We're actually meditating while we're sitting there doing something that we like to do that's simple and rote and productive. But being productive and service to others are great ways to displace those negative thoughts and to bring good and harmony and love into your life. I got a couple little sayings that I came across over my life that I wanted to share with you. And one is my personal cardinal rule in life. And this should be part of the Declaration of Principles, in my opinion. And that is to never interfere in the free will of another person, unless that person is interfering in the free will of another person. It's the only time to interfere in the free will of another. Allow a person to be. Let them have their thoughts. Let them be. You don't have to be around them. You can leave. But you don't need to convince them. You don't need to show them that you're right. That's probably the worst thing to do. You don't need to prove that you're correct. Leave them be. If they're ready for your information, they will take it. But if, let's say that person is interfering, it's somebody stealing a handbag from another person. Well, they're interfering in the free will of that person. It's time to intervene, if you can, if it's safe, if it's appropriate. But that's my cardinal rule, and I'll repeat it. Never interfere in the free will of another person unless that person interfering in the free will of another. Another thing that I've come across is there is a difference between normal and healthy. It may be normal in some communities where the husband comes home and beats the wife, but is that healthy? And that applies to our daily living too. Some of the things that we do may be normal or ritual for us, but is it healthy? Think about that. Reflect on that. Oh, this is a good one. Our 3D universe that we
can't see him.
The same thing if you go to a Walmart or Kmart or a Target, they're exactly the same layout, it's exactly the same product, exactly the same, exactly the same. It's just, there's no novelty there. It leads to stagnation. The universe loves novelty, and that's how we grow it. How do we create novelty? And that's through dialogue. It's the ability of two people to sit there and disagree, but carry thoughts. The third person who hears it, hears both sides of the story, and goes, wow, I got a great idea. Oh, that's how the universe works. You can't stagnate controlling other people's thoughts or language. It's not society. Society will stagnate. And it's never worked in the past. Never throughout history has humanity been held back but for a short time. Because it's not the nature of humanity. The universe will rebel against those that search for control. And it won't be pretty when it rebels. It never has been and never will be. If you want to know the future, look at history. Don't come to Marty's. Open your history. There are cycles in life. We all have our ups and downs. There's a cycle of good, cycle of bad, cycle of nothing. They call it nothing times and mean times. Not for a reason. For a good reason. But there are cycles in everything. There are short cycles, there are long cycles. And some of the long cycles that I see right now are retreating in the United States. And feel great. Look at Rome. Look what happened in Rome. The exact same thing is happening today. And it's going to go through its phase. And I'll tell you right now, the phase that we're going to have to go through might be rather difficult for a while. But don't worry. Knowing that you are in the divine order of the universe. So in order to be in the divine order of the universe, you have to have no fear or work enough to keep more love in your heart and in your soul than fear. Because fear will only lead you to what you're afraid of. Love and desire and hate on the mountains, through valleys, through the clouds. Where you don't know what's on the other side. That comes with faith in loving God. And trust in God. This right here is your most important aspect. During this sermon. To discern when somebody's sitting there doing something or telling you something, are they making you afraid for some reason? Are they making you to be fearful of a certain situation? If they're working to make you fearful, there's very likely a deception behind that. A deception to keep you earthbound. So be aware when somebody tells you something someplace, talks to you, you hear it, this is the only way, if you don't do this, this is a terrible thing is going to happen to you. Stand back. I caution you, stand back and observe. And listen to hear. Are they making you feel afraid? Is your emotion, your gut saying, wait, this is fearful? Stand back. Assess. And be cautious around that individual or whoever's telling you that. Because I can pretty much assure you, it's not a Mack truck coming down the street, barreling through that you're stepping in front of. No, it's somebody very likely creating an illusion of reality that they're using to induce you to stay at a lower point so that you are controlled and you are manipulated. And Jesus said, beware of the people who deceive. And they all have one way to tell them apart. This is a good clue that I learned to know. Look at the people who have inappropriate smiles. They're telling you something bad and they have a smile. They're telling you things and that smile, as soon as they're on television or they're elsewhere, there's this smile, this smirk on their face. When you see that, beware. They may be honest and truthful. That may be plastic surgery that looks like. But beware the people who use that smile to lead you astray. And I speak experience on that. With that, in the wonderful 40 years.
son has been with us 40 years, and he's been many roles in on the board, and now he's president of the church. So we don't know how we're going to let him go. And so he's also, when I started out, in the senior position, so it was just the two of us on the podium when I started out, and it's the two of us. And so we graduated. So we thank to have him. And thank you for his journey, and know that his journey will be great, the new journey, and we wish him well with your journey. And we hope he will. All of us, will be looking at our lives at some point, seeing what journey like to take it, where we want to go. And some said the journey will take you to stay right where we are, and some will say we'll move next door, some will say we'll move another city. But it depends on where our heart takes us and that truth takes us. And what that, and not being that fear, but understanding that